Hello YouTube, it's Sonny here with Hobbies and Man once again, and today we're going to be doing another manga review video. Today we're going to be looking at the second part of Vinland Saga, the Slave Arc, or the Farmland Arc, which is probably what I'm going to call it on the video title, because I'm pretty sure if you put things like slave in titles, it's bad for YouTube. But we are going to be talking about the Vinland Saga Slave Arc, which covers chapters 55 to 99. So that's actually covered in the last chapter of Vinland Saga 4. Completely covered in Vinland Saga 5, again completely covered in Vinland Saga 6, and almost completely covering Vinland Saga Book 7. Only the last chapter left over is not part of this arc, and it's a really good one. So even though I don't really need to go back and tell you all of the book stats, let me just do that anyways really quickly. So yeah, Vinland Saga Slave Arc, chapters 55 to 99. It's written by Makoto Yukimura, it's published by Kodansha, the demographic is seinen, and the genres here are literally just historical fiction. You can say there's elements of fantasy, but not really. And of course, there's a Viking tale, there's a medieval fiction kind of story. And it does have an adaptation. I think season 2 is actually going to be covering this arc specifically, which is pretty cool. I'm pretty sure the first season covered only the war arc, the first arc of the story, up to chapters 54. And the premise of this specific arc is that we follow Thorfinn after his fallout with Canute. You know, the previous story, or the previous arc, finishes with Thorfinn slicing Canute's face and going away, being sold into slavery. And we get to see him as a slave on this large farm. If I remember correctly, this is back in Denmark, or maybe Sweden. I think it was Denmark. On the Kettle farm, and he is living there. And then following the arrival of another slave from England called Einar, who also happens to be of Nordic descent, but has been someone that comes from a family that had been settled in England for a long time. We see the next 4 years of their lives unfold as Thorfinn deals with his demons and deals with the things that are happening around him, because at this point, Thorfinn is very much empty. He doesn't really have anything to live for, and he just kind of exists, and he hasn't been able to die, basically. It's a really interesting kind of way of looking at things, honestly. I don't really want to bring it up, but the Obi-Wan Kenobi show should have been more or less what this arc of Vinland Saga has been, because it has everything that you need. It has, you know, meditations on the self. It has dealing with the reality of what you've done. It has people that are similar to you, but not exactly the same, talking to you and trying to help you. You have people that are trying to take over this area, but that you have to stand up for. And there's a huge element of pacifism and kind of non-violence that also has to do with all of the violence that's being committed towards Thorfinn. And I think it's really, really interesting, and I really would have liked to see, you know, the Obi-Wan Kenobi show kind of deal with all of the stuff that this arc of Vinland Saga has been dealing with. And it's awesome, it's so good, I really, really enjoy it. So let's get into the proper review here. The plotline is great. It starts with Einar, actually. It doesn't follow Thorfinn until about the second or third chapter. And it follows Einar kind of telling you the story of how he came to be on the Kettle farm. I think, I think Kettle is the name of the farm owner. And it might have been his last name. I'm not too sure. But everyone just refers to him as Kettle, so I guess it doesn't really matter. And then he meets Thorfinn as he is sharing a plot of land on this farm with Thorfinn that they have to prepare themselves. They have to cut down all the trees, and then they have to start plowing the land and preparing it for seeding it with wheat. And with this plot of land that Kettle has given them, they will eventually be able to earn back their freedom through basically paying it off. And we get to see them interacting. Thorfinn is basically mute at this point. He doesn't really talk. He has no emotions, no feelings. He just exists. And he just does whatever needs to be done. He doesn't really contemplate or have any emotions, honestly, at this point. And we see them working towards their freedom and developing their relationship with each other. and their relationship with other people on the farm. We get to see them interacting with the old master, Sverkel, I think is his name, who happens to be the father of Keto, who is now the current owner of the farm. And we get to see them interacting with guests on the farm, which are actually bodyguards. We get to see them interacting with other farmhands that have a kind of discriminatory outlook on them. It's kind of like a socio-political, socio-economic kind of situation, a classist type of situation, where they don't believe that slaves should be able to gain their freedom. They should be relegated to the lowest of the low. And they come in contact with Thorfinn and Einar, and of course there is violence to be had there, right? And we get to see that Thorfinn is also dealing with his own demons. He's dealing with basically PTSD, but also the realization and the guilt of all of the horrors that he caused, all of the things that he did to others, in a way that is very, very interesting, because, you know, Thorfinn set out to do something to avenge the death of his father. But along the way of doing this, he actually caused so much more pain and suffering to everyone else in a very similar fashion to how Askeladd did it to him, right? So he would kill families all over the place. He would hurt people, and he would cause pain to others that was very similar to the pain that he felt as an individual too. And he's learning to deal with this. And then there's even this moment where he, like, descends into hell during a dream, and he talks to Askeladd, and they have a moment where Thorfinn tries to understand. And then the best part of the story probably is this conversation he has with Einar that is overheard by the old master Sverkel, who then gives him a bit of advice. He says, if you are empty, that means that anything can fit inside you. So find something that is, you know, meaningful. And it's really, really cool. It's such a good story. It's really, really awesome. I really enjoy it. And then it gets even better when there's this political situation that occurs. We get to see Canute again, as he has taken over being king of England for sure. And then he moves on to being king of Denmark through this political situation that occurs with his brother Harold. And I think at this point it starts deviating from real life history, or it has deviated at some point earlier in the story. I'm not too sure exactly, because I think Harold was the one that had united all of these countries, right? But I'm not too sure. Maybe I'm incorrect about that part. Doesn't really matter. The point is that, you know, Canute makes it to Denmark. He takes over Denmark, and then he decides to set out on this conquest of certain areas of Denmark in order to secure economic power. And he kind of justifies it in the same, in this kind of way of, like, we hurt a few to protect a lot of people. And, you know, technically, I guess it is kind of like the right way to do it. But, you know, the whole point of this manga is to deal with violence and non-violence, right? And so you have to pit these two ideologies against each other. And then that is one of the major situations that occur. After Canute does this, you know, he goes after the Kettle Farm, and he comes in contact with Thorfinn, who is now a pacifist. And Canute is now a very warrior, you know, war-hungry kind of man. And it's a really good plot line. It's so interesting. It's so meaningful. It does start slow. I'm not gonna lie. The first volume of this part, this first omnibus, is going to be a very big change of pace from the original arc, right? So, you know, be aware of that. There is a slight difference, but I think that it gets so good that it doesn't even matter that it starts out slow, right? Because you basically had, like, this story that went up, and then it had to crash down for it to be able to climb up again. And at the climb, it manages to do so well. It's so good. It's so well executed. Makoto Yukimura is a god of manga right now. Like, I think it's recent, like, it's obviously recency bias, but he's just so good at writing right now, and I'm just so happy to be reading the series. Like, for sure. I don't know. It's so good. In terms of characters, we have Thorfinn, obviously, of course, who is now a different man from what he was before. He has experienced war, and now he has experienced guilt, and he is trying to climb up to be a true warrior like his father was before him. And a true warrior, like, he knew Askeladd might have been able to be, and the true warrior that he is himself, and he's trying to figure out what this means, right? And it's so cool. We have Old Master Spherical, Patter, who is an ex-slave that gained his freedom and then started working at the Kettle Farm, who actually is an interesting character because he looks like a Roman legionnaire. Like, I don't know why, he just like, it looks very different from everyone else, and he looks really Roman, and I don't know why this is. It makes no sense, but like, it doesn't really matter. He just looks really different from everyone else. And then we get to see this other character who is Snake, who is the leader of the guests or the guards that stay at the Kettle Farm, and he's an interesting character as well. He is he's basically the Askeladd of this arc. However, he's not really like Askeladd. He just happens to be a person that is more like relaxed, more like easy on himself than Thorfinn ever was as a warrior, but it is still a very proud warrior. So he's kind of somewhere between Askeladd and Thorfinn in terms of his characterization. And he's a very interesting character because he provides a very interesting backdrop for Thorfinn's development as a comparison, right? So it's really, really cool how he exists there. Then we have Arnheid. I don't really know how to say her name. Arnheid. And she happens to be a very major character. She actually, I guess, kind of ends up being fridged at one point, but she is a very good character. She provides a lot of context to the slave culture of this part of the of history and of this part of the story, and also provides an interesting character in and of herself. She's very cool. She seems to be mysterious, and then eventually we get to see a lot of her past surface as suddenly her husband shows up one day, and he's a crazed beast of a man. And it's very, very interesting. I really like her as a character. I don't really want to say too much specifically about her, but she's a very good character. She's great. Then, of course, we have Ketil, and then his two sons, Omar and Thorgil. And Omar is a whiny Draco Malfoy type boy. However, he happens to grow as he goes through this arc, and he's pretty good by the end of it. I quite like him, but he begins pretty, stupidly, and I think that it's an interesting characterization. Thorgil happens to have a very static character, arc, but he manages to be so powerful and so bestial and just so brutal. He's a very badass character as well, but he's not a good character. He just kind of exists to show the worst parts of the Viking culture, or the parts that, are very directly linked to the theme of violence in this story. And then we have Canute, who is a very interesting character. He has fully embraced this ideology of being a powerful warrior man in order to try to create his utopia. But along the way, he does so many evil things that he's being haunted by his father. And it's very interesting. I really like Canute a lot. He's a very good character. And now we get to see Canute and Thorfinn pitted as two sides of the same coin, and I think that that's really, really cool. I guess technically speaking, they were already placed as two sides of the same coin earlier in the series, but we get to see an interaction between the two of them where we see them, acknowledge this basically, which is really, really good. In terms of world building, again, it's not really world building in the sense of like developing a fantasy world, but it's mostly setting building and teaching you the ways of these people in this time period. So it's really, really cool. There's lots of development of the Nordic practices of farming and slave ownership of this time period. We get to learn a lot about how this stuff works for them. And we get to see a lot of politics in the sense of like might makes right. And also just how that turns into a political system within the Viking culture. And it's very, very interesting. I quite liked it a lot. But there really isn't too much to say about that. I mean, it's just setting building mostly. Of course, the art style is amazing as always. It continues to be awesome. I think it does get a little bit better, but I can't really tell all that much because honestly, between how long the mangaka has to develop his art style across the time period that it takes him to make a single chapter, I think that his art style is a lot more gradual to change between arcs and stories, compared to a mangaka like, you know, that does a weekly series, right? Because, like, if you look at Horikoshi at chapter 1 and at chapter 100, I think his art style looks really, really different. It looks way more polished by chapter 100, but I can't really say that I think the same thing reading through this stuff. And it's kind of different because it doesn't really manage to maintain the same character design, because these characters are actually physically getting older in like a noticeable way. And so each time that he draws the character, he kind of has to draw them differently from the get-go. And so he can't really smooth out his style the same way that a mangaka that does a weekly series that takes place over a couple months is going to be able to. So it's pretty interesting how that kind of works. But the art style is amazing. It's really, really good. In terms of fan service, there really isn't too much there. Again, we get to see some boobies here and there, but there really isn't anything major in anything like that. In terms of a rating, it's a 5 out of 5. It continues to be amazing. I don't know if this is going to continue into the next couple volumes, but right now it's 2 for 2, man. It's perfect. There really is nothing wrong with this series at all. I have never been so excited by pacifism in my life, and it's just really badass. So yeah, there really isn't anything else to say. I don't really have to tell you recommendations and similar titles because I already did in the first review. So yeah, I hope you guys enjoyed the video. If you did, please like, subscribe, and comment down below. Let me know what you thought. And thank you guys very much for watching. How do you guys like Vinland Saga? Have you read it? Have you not read it? Did I just spoil everything for you? Let me know down in the comments. And thank you guys very much for watching. See you guys later.